wake up, get back in the game. This is not a time for giving in. This is not a time for quitting. This is an exciting moment in time and history. Get in the game. He wakes them up. John 17. Then into John chapter 18. This is comedy at its best. The guards rush to arrest Jesus. They arrest him and begin to take him away. Peter, who has walked with Jesus all this way. Peter, who has heard Jesus say, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Peter, who has heard Jesus say, "Love your enemies." Peter, who has learned so much, pulls out his sword and chops off somebody's ear. Oh, Peter. And it's comedy at its best, because now Jesus is going to stoop down and he picks up the guard's ear. And he sticks it back on. And he prays, and the ear is reattached to the head, and he looks, oh, Peter. And into John 19 we step. Oh, we're not quite there. Just before we get there, there's Peter. Jesus has been arrested now. A slave girl comes to Peter and says, "Peter, are you with him?" And Peter says, not me. And again, a little girl comes and says, "Are you with him?" Not me. And then once more, an insignificant servant comes and says, "I'm sure it was you. You were with him." "No, not me." And he just gets out his third denial. The cock crows. He looks into the courtyard, into the marred, broken, blood-stained face of Jesus, wearing that crown of thorns, and their eyes meet, and something inside Peter breaks. Something inside him breaks. And I'd love to give credit to Peter at this point, by the way, because he's denied him 3 times. Yes, absolutely, but he's the only disciple in a place to be able to deny Jesus. The other disciples are locked in some room somewhere with the equivalent of the first century sofa pushed against the door. This is the only disciple who's around to deny Jesus. But he's denied him 3 times, and now he sees the face of the one who chose him, who recognized him as the insignificant man that he was, but still chose him. And now into John 19 he steps. This is a dark time for Peter. You see, we kind of miss this sometimes. He doesn't know what to do now. We just flip over the next chapter and it's okay, but Peter can't do that. He's got 2 days of waiting now. And he's not quite sure what those 2 days are going to hold, or how long that period will be. So he does what we all do when we don't know what's happening. He does what we all do when everything goes wrong. He goes back to the thing that's familiar. And the unfortunate thing is, for some of us, the thing which is familiar is quite destructive. But when things go wrong, we return to that. For Peter, he's going to return to his fishing boat. He's going to return to his net. And now he's going to sit on the Sea of Galilee, and he's going to replay again and again and again that denial. It's been a roller coaster ride for Peter. There's some glorious heights, but now he has crashed spectacularly into the ground, and the whole thing is broken. We don't get this. And sometimes we do this wrong. You see, we will never truly understand the glory of Easter Sunday if we don't get the hurt, the pain, the lament of Good Friday. We like to just jump into victory. But the depth of despair at this point, and it's even worse, even if we get the depth of despair at this point, we still jump over Saturday, this in-between time. This is the hardest point of them all, I think. You've managed to move past despair, but you haven't moved into victory. And you hang in the middle, this in-between place. And Peter's going to have to sit in there, and he doesn't know what's going on. And everything inside him is broken. Everything inside him is lost. Everything is destroyed. It's all gone wrong. And in the midst of that desperation, he sits on the Sea of Galilee with his fishing nets. And John chapter 20 is about to come. The resurrection is about to take place. Some ladies are going to see Jesus rise from the dead, and he's going to say some incredible words to them. "I'm back." And he says something incredibly interesting. He says to the ladies, tell my disciples that I have risen from the dead, and tell Peter. That's what John's Gospel says, and tell Peter. Now, if you're Peter, what do you hear when you hear those words? Do you hear, I'm so special, he's called me by name? Or do you hear, tell the disciples and tell Peter, means that I don't get to be a disciple anymore. I'm out. I've blown it. It's all gone wrong. And that's where Peter is. It's all gone wrong. And if I just jump over chapter 21, because we have to come back here very soon, if I jump over 21, I land in the book of Acts, and the whole thing's different. If I jump over John 21 into the book of Acts, everything's spectacular. This is Peter. He stands and addresses the multitudes. Thousands of them come flocking to give their lives to this Jesus. Into Acts chapter 3, he's walking to the temple. It's the hour of prayer. There's a man on the side of the road, but only Peter sees the man. Everybody else sees cripple. Everybody else sees disabled. Everybody else sees a piece of furniture. Everybody else walks past, but Jesus sees the man. Peter sees the man. He looks at him. He sees him. He reaches out to him. How could he do that? Because he's been trained. He's discipled. This is Peter, super disciple. He's learned from Jesus. This is the Jesus who goes out of his way to stand by a well with a woman who's a Samaritan. One individual. This is a Jesus who goes to find Zacchaeus up a tree. The individual. This is a Jesus who tells stories about leaving 99 to find the one. The individual. Peter sees the man. The one. The single. The individual. He reaches out towards him. 1804, fishing village on the edge of Edinburgh, Scotland. A meeting's taking place. A conversation happens. They're trying to decide whether they keep their minister or get rid of him. He hasn't done anything of any significance that year, they say. He's only run a Sunday school in which one little boy has given his life to Jesus. That's all he's done. Nothing of significance this year. In this Scottish fishing village, they decide to sack him, get rid of their minister. We need a young one, a new one. So they get rid of him. Of course, the little boy grows up. His name is Robert Moffat. He's the father of modern missions. He's going to stand in a university in the south of England, and he's going to say, I've been to Africa. I've seen the smoke of 1,000 villages where they've not heard the gospel. Who will go? And in the middle of that, a student by the name of David Livingstone stands up and says, me, I'll go and do it. And he goes and changes the face of Africa, bringing Jesus to all those remote places. And Africa today owes a huge debt of gratitude to a minister from a Scottish fishing village who didn't do anything of significance that year except see one. He saw the one. And that's Peter now. He sees the one. He's powered by, oh God, I know what I'm doing now. Now how's that possible? What brought about the change? The baptism of the Holy Spirit. You've missed it. You're wrong. The baptism of the Holy Spirit's good, but it's not what makes this possible. Something has to happen inside Peter to change his heart before this can even happen, before the Holy Spirit can even come. Something else. Right there. John chapter 21. Let's go there. This is a really interesting chapter because it's not supposed to be there. I'll explain that to you. See, the whole of John's gospel is the most perfectly formed, well-balanced, structured gospel there is, built with the Greek mindset. It starts way down here in John chapter 1, where Jesus says, I've come to bring life that you might believe, and that life is the light of men. So it starts off naming the topics of this gospel. This is about life and about belief. And right at the very, very end, John 20, these things were written that you might believe and might have life. Full stop, end of John 20, supposed to be the end of the gospel. John chapter 11, where we heard earlier about Lazarus, the whole thing balances here. I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even though he die, yet shall he live. Belief and life. It's the most wonderfully, perfectly formed and balanced gospel, with those themes over the whole thing. And it's supposed to end at the end of John 20. There's a full stop. It's done. It's sorted. But oh, Peter has even managed to mess up the structure of the greatest gospel. You need to hear this. This is really important. Jesus will mess up your structure for the sake of the one. That's going to be really disappointing if you're the expert with flow charts and little diagrams. He'll mess the whole thing up and throw it away for the sake of the one. He does that. And it can't end. It can't end because of Peter. There's nothing else left to do. He's died. He's risen. The disciples are back. He's told them to go and make disciples of all nations. He's ended about what this gospel's about. It's all done. The only thing left, Peter. And so we have to go to John 21, and this is where it all hinges. Listen. What happens there is not possible if this doesn't happen right. The whole build-up to here is really important, but if he doesn't get this right, that's irrelevant. And we stand right here with Peter. And you have to love him. You love him because you're like him. You understand what it is to be chosen by a God. You understand what it is to get it so spectacularly wrong at times. You know what it is to take a risk and begin to sink at times. We like Peter. And this is one of my favorite bits. Jesus is on the beach. Peter and the disciples are on a boat. They see Jesus on the beach. The other disciples say, "That's Jesus. Quick, let's get to the beach." And they begin to row. Not Peter. Rowing is not for Peter. Peter is over the side and swimming for it. You just have to love this man. And he swims all the way to the beach. He crawls up onto the beach. And now it's awkward. This is his first meeting with a Jesus who he denied. And now he's face to face with the King of the universe. And this is where the whole thing hinges. This is the big moment. And Peter lifts up his head and he looks at Jesus, and Jesus looks at him and says to him, "Peter, unfinished business. We've got to resolve this here and now. And if we get this right, then the world will be a different place." Because you see, even with the one, the multitude, the key to the multitude was the one. Thousands of people are going to come and hear the gospel again in Acts 3 because of that miracle that's going to take place there. So even before we get to Acts chapter 4, he's led at least 10,000 people to Jesus. That's not a bad day's work. The bishop might give me a rise if I manage that. The bishop might make me bishop if I manage that. There he is. And they're facing each other. And Jesus looks at Peter. And this is where it all hangs, everybody. He says to him, "Peter, do you love me?" It's not going to get any more complicated. Peter says, "You know that I love you. Do you love me?" Yes, you know that I do. Peter, before you answer, Peter, you need to understand that there will come a time, this is John's gospel again, there will come a time where people will take you where you do not want to go, and you will die in a way that you do not want to die. And John's gospel says, by this he began to speak to Peter about the way that he would die. And church history tells us that Peter was taken, and he was crucified, but he refused the honor of dying like his king, so he asked to be crucified upside down. And that's how Peter died. And right here in John 21, Jesus is saying to him, "Listen, this whole thing, for you, it's going to end with your martyrdom, Peter. Now, before you answer, bear that in mind, but here we go. Peter, do you love me?"